Hi, I'm Pete Schmidt. It's great to be part of Mako's series on talking blues and this podcast. It's great to be invited. Thanks for inviting me, Mako.
You're welcome. So you're basically in Lima, Peru now,
Yes, I am.
and you spend all your time there.
Yeah, it's very rare actually that I can visit Canada or America. I mean, especially since the pandemic. But I've largely been here for the last 11 years in Lima, Peru.
So I want to get to that because I think it's an interesting backstory. But let me go back a number of years to the time you picked up the trumpet. That's how you started with music, correct?
Yes, you remember. You
Um,
wouldn't remember me back then, but
tell me about tell me about the trumpet, or tell me about your connection with music.
well, the trumpet definitely came from public school when we still had music classes way back. And so my instrument of choice was a trumpet. And that's really how I started because we had the school band, we had music classes, and I imagined myself being a great Maynard Ferguson or a Louis Armstrong or
How old were you?
um,
What grade?
I started when I was around 10 on trumpet. So I would have been in public school, and by 11, I had a trumpet and I was taking side lessons at music stores, right? So,
But the trumpet wasn't good enough for you.
well, it was good in a way. I was part of a concert band. I was a young kid playing with adults, playing show tunes and pop music that would have been pop music in the 40s and 50s and so on. So it wasn't really my thing. I was, 10, 11. Well, I started in the concert band maybe around 12 years old. So I didn't really like the music, or I didn't, wasn't really into it. And I found myself trying to figure out how to play Deep Purple and Black Sabbath songs on my trumpet. So that was a sign that maybe I might need to change instruments. So that's what happened to the trumpet. Let's put it that way.
I remember this about the Deep Purple thing because I remember once
Yeah,
you told me that you were into
yeah,
Deep Purple, and I just back then when all I heard you play was the blues, I thought Deep
right.
Purple. So, so because the trumpet couldn't play the guitar parts, you decided to pick up the guitar. How difficult was that transition?
Well, I really loved guitar music, and I loved the sound, and of course, I loved the energy. And it was classic rock, and that was of the day. So there was a lot of bands that I was into, and the sound of that guitar by Richie Blackmore was great. It reeled me in, and I realized that I'm not going to get that out of a trumpet. Might be able to play the notes, but it's not. It was the sound that I was after. And I would watch I'd look at the back of the album cover and see him with his Fender Stratocaster guitar, and I thought I have to get one of those. And so, yeah, bit by bit, the trumpet took a back seat, and I wasn't really practicing anymore. I was just thinking about the guitar. And so that's really what happened. And yeah, so the music really propelled me in that direction of playing the guitar.
And at this point, you're still listening to rock. How does it turn into blues? How do you get from your Deep Purple to your Howlin' Wolf?
Well, I really started off playing hard rock, and when I was really young. 14 and 15 is when I started electric guitar. Between about 14 and a half years old. So and I was playing hard rock, but in that hard rock, there was always a little sound of blues creeping through. I really got into, of course, listening. I heard Red House by Jimi Hendrix, and I heard that song by the great Deep Purple called Lazy, which is actually kind of a blues song. And of course, Cream came in, and so some of the classic Led Zeppelin. The first album I ever bought was Led Zeppelin 2, and that had some blues sounds on it. And so I was into that sound, and I noticed that the songs of the hard rock songs that had that blues feeling in it attracted me most. So I was already making the transition at that point. I didn't switch over to thinking about blues exclusively, but in my hard rock phase or my classic rock phase, I always gravitated towards the blues part.
Did your rock bands do much gigging?
Actually, we did a fair bit. I mean, we were kids, right? We were doing our classes. Like I would go to group guitar lessons for a year or two. I met a lot of friends that I'm still in contact with to this day. We played in our little ensemble, our little band, and we would do talent shows and outdoor community festivals. And then, 17 or 18 years old, with permission from our parents, we could go to the local pub or bar and open for somebody, And we were playing classic rock, and we weren't playing it very well, but we were doing it, and we were quite fearless when I think back about those days now. So we actually did as many gigs as we could, including some kind of semi reputable bars in Toronto that are probably long gone now that were pretty grimy and grungy, but we had that chance and we were in there quickly to take advantage of the opportunity.
Did you think this is what I want to do as a living?
Maybe it would have been a bit of a dream at that time. I wasn't really thinking, of course, probably most of us wanted to be musicians or stars at that age. And, adolescents were thinking about being stars, but the realistic, thought behind it, rationally thinking about it, didn't enter into our minds. So I may have been dreaming about that, but I wasn't on any kind of career path or thinking that I was going to, that's it for me. I found my thing. I don't think so in my case, but I knew that music would always be a part of my life. That's for sure.
How did you go more deeper into the blues and get into the Toronto blues scene?
Hmm. Well, that live El Macambo recording of Stevie Ray Vaughan that was played on the city TV, the simulcast. I remember that, and that really made me focus in on blues at the time, 1983, I believe. And so that's where I wanted to go musically. That's what I wanted to do. That was a helpful program because it really got me focused on playing that. And I moved out west to Vancouver for a couple years in the early 90s. But between that time that I heard Stevie Ray Vaughan and between the time that concert and the time that I moved, I was just, through university playing in kind of rock blues bands. But I always wanted to get those blues numbers in, and I was always looking for people. I didn't have too much luck in forming a band for traditional blues or anything, but I was a regular at Albert's Hall and Helma Combo and Grossman's and so on. So I had my formative studying years at that time period. And when I moved out west, that's when I really made the conversion into playing music.
What was is it something about being out west that lend itself to that, or
Yeah, there was a great blues club at the time called the Yale Hotel, and which is no longer there. But what really made me put me over the edge was going to see on a stormy Vancouver night in the winter, rainy and dark. I went to see John Hammond do a solo gig at the Yale on like a Wednesday night, and there was five people in the bar, five customers, and I guess he was waiting for more customers to come or something, but nobody. There was only five of them, so he just said, why don't we just grab seats and just gather around, and I'm just going to play stuff. And we're like, oh, that's why, wow. So we were like, in a circle and just watching him play, and of course, you've seen John Hammond. When he does a solo gig, it's just like a full band. He has his feet going. He has his harmonica. He's singing. He's pounding on his guitar, and he plays great. So it's just mesmerizing to watch him. And yeah, it was a full length concert for five of us. It was amazing. So the next day, that was it. I was at the CD store looking for everything and just deciding that, oh, that's it. I have to, I had just finished up a contract job in Vancouver, and I had decided already about a month earlier to move back to Toronto. And that was it. Like, I was coming back to Toronto, and I was definitely this time going to get involved in the Toronto blues scene because I had made that plan to come back to back home. So that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
So, what's your playing like at this point? Like,
Yeah, I really got into it. I'd been listening a lot, and I'd gone to see a lot of shows. I'd seen so many shows, and always up front, and studying it and listening a lot. And I'd been playing a fair bit. So, I was definitely elementary, but I was definitely going in that traditional blues route, to playing traditionally, not the, casting away from the usual rock blues, As much as I liked the Clapton and Hendrix and Steve Ray Vaughan, I really was taken by the traditional sound.
which guitarist would you have focused in on?
Um, just like it is today, my favorites are like T-Bone Walker and Jimmy Reed, and I really like the guitarists like Robert Lockwood Jr. and so on that were playing behind the harmonica players. So that's, for example, three examples. Of course, the three kings, the BB and Albert and Freddie, and so that those were probably some of the first ones that I really got into. And at that time, I was really kind of focusing on. I realized that you can't learn everything, so you've got to pick something. And instead of going the acoustic route, as much as I loved it, I thought I wanted to be a member of a band. So I was listening to that type of music that would have facilitated this. And so, yeah, those would have been some of the first ones that I really got into.
So you come back to Toronto and you think I'm gonna get into the blues scene. How easy is it to get into the blues scene of the city?
Well, it wasn't very easy, actually. There was a pretty good active club or bar scene at the time. There was quite a few places, actually. And so, as I had done before, I just started to go and watch some of the local bands. And at the time as well, there was quite a few festivals, much more than there would be now, blues festivals. So I would go to them, and I wound up meeting people through the Toronto Blues Society as well, and people that just wanted to get together and play. And so I had, sort of loftier ambitions, I guess. I really wanted to do it. But so, I met up with people and we started jamming and I started to go to jam nights as well. At the time, the jam night was something, quite common, including the classic Grossman's jam and so on. So yeah, that's kind of how it started, and it didn't go right away, but it went relatively quick. Within around 6 months of coming back, I had already started to, do the odd gig here and there with some, whichever, whatever the names of the bands were, I don't know, but I can't remember. But we definitely started to do it as quickly as we could. In my case, joining various bands at the time.
And that was always the goal to be a band member.
Yeah, at the time, and at the at and, in the initial point of starting off in Toronto, I just wanted to be a member of a band, just to get into it quickly and play the music that I wanted to play as well. That traditional kind of real getting back to the roots style blues, not the more contemporary sound. So it was a little trickier in that respect because the traditional blues has a limited following, and there's a handful of musicians that do it that style. At the time there was more in Toronto, but still very few musicians in comparison to other forms of music.
Would you have had a goal at that point? Was there anything that you were trying to achieve? Was it simply just get in a band and play, or did you have any other kind of a goal for for either a career or for something you're working towards?
Hmm. Um, well, it changed as I got into the started to do some gigs. I of course I was thinking further ahead that I wanted to get into better bands. And then, of course, the idea of doing some recordings came in, and, just to get closer and closer to the pure roots. I was a real purist at the time and understand it. That was a goal, like really understand finer points and, just to be in better and better ensembles and work on the quality of that. That was a shorter term goal, but I was working pretty hard at that and of course, tried to team up with musicians that were more experienced and better than me. I really wanted to be with because I realized that that's a way of really understanding the music and understanding your place in an ensemble is to play with the best musicians you possibly can, and it's a way of growing. So that was a goal. Yeah.
Can I ask you who you might have encountered that was really helpful to you?
One of the first musicians that I met and that I started doing gigs with very shortly after moving back to Toronto was Mark Bird Stafford. And yeah, it was not long after, just a couple months, maybe 3 or 4 months after I came back. And we had met at some jam, and I kept in touch with him quickly. And then he had me on a gig, and that was great. And it started to we started to play more often, and it got me sort of thinking more about that style of music, the harmonica blues. And I really love the guitar behind the harmonica blues from the 50s. And I found that it was something that, you really had to study, and it became a goal to really get into that style of music, and being a company player behind harmonica, traditional blues harmonica, because I love the music. It was some of the first CDs at the time that I bought, the Little Walter and Sonny Boy Williamson and the Junior Wells and so on.
Is there something, because I've interviewed a few people who've kind of made a name being guitar players for harmonica players like Alex Schultz and Rick Holmstrom.
Yeah.
Other than just not getting in the way of the harmonica, what how would you describe what the role of the guitar player supporting a harmonica player would be?
Well, it sets up a base for harmonicas. It sets up it's a traditional style coming probably from originally from the Delta, but then when it started in Chicago, there was a sort of a platform that was happening. Muddy Waters band had this because he had the great harmonica players. And Little Walter split off from that. Sonny Boy Williamson, there was that chest sound as well, which they used the same musicians generally, pooled them together with different harmonica players. So there was a sound and a style. So the guitar fits in that sound and style. And of course, they were tailoring it to the wishes of the harmonica player, what they had in there. And they were probably just improvising at the time too. When you listen back to those recordings, you hear that yeah, they're just playing. They're just playing it and putting in their own feel. So at the time, they were probably creating it, ad libbing it. So that's the sound of some of those great guitar players like Robert Lockwood and Jimmy Rogers, and even Eddie Taylor behind Jimmy Reed. Such natural kind of improvised. There's a sound. It's um, a multi-layered sound when it comes to the guitar and how it fits into those into that style.
So as a guitar player who's a traditionalist, who's looking up to these specific players and the specific type of music accompanying harmonica players, are you trying to imitate or are you trying to, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but how do you pursue that? Do you try to imitate these greats or do you try to carve out something unique to you, yet doing what they do?
Well, and when you first start up with a new style of music, I really do think it is, a matter of learning, and you do have to emulate. And at the time, we didn't have YouTube or anything to watch, videos on how to do it. So we had to do that by ear. So inevitably, we'll wind up doing things in our own way. We would have been listening to those records, and at the time too, there was harmonica players like Kim Wilson and Rod Piazza and so on that were doing their kind of covers as well of the greats. So we would have learned filtered through. Also coming up to the blues bars in Toronto as well. We could go and see somebody do their take, and keeping it pretty traditional because most of the harmonica players that I knew at the time were really traditionalists as well. So they'd want it as close as possible to the original. So that was a further motivator to kind of get it close. But inevitably, you wind up putting your own stamp on it because there's only so much time to copy. And really, for the feel, you need, as a band, you have to let it kind of go as it goes instead of trying to cut and paste or put it together in in sort of a mechanical way. It has to be naturally flowing. So yes, the answer is eventually we wind up putting our own take on it, our feel, or our own sound, or our own way of expressing what we're trying to do.
Was there a point where you realized that you had reached the point where you wanted to be? And I know it's an ongoing pursuit, but from that kid who saw John Hammond decide to come back to Toronto and pursue playing blues, how long did it take till you felt like, yeah, I think I'm a blues guitar player?
Um, yeah. Well, it was a gradual process, but at one point I was doing a lot of gigs each week, and the festivals had started for me. I was able to, play with musicians that were of the standing where they were invited by festivals, and the shows were getting better, and the calendar was filling up. So at that point, I realized that yeah, this can be considered as something like a form of work as well. It doesn't just have to be like a hobby pursuit. And I was still really into playing. I was really, really focusing on the playing part. And whatever work that I was doing on the side was always tailored to allowing me to have the time that I needed and wanted to do the music. So it kind of came gradually, but I realized that, um, my first goals had been achieved that way when I got to the point where I was, you know, really moving it up a notch as far as playing live goes.
So let's talk about some of the people you've played with. I didn't know that you had actually played with Henry Butler
Hmm.
at a festival somewhere. What was
Yeah,
that
right.
like?
Yeah, that was at the Harvest Blues Festival. Well, yeah, and so we had done our shows, and then there was a nighttime kind of sessions. There was a nighttime session, and one of the musicians didn't have a band. That would have been Henry Butler. So he needed a guitar player, and he needed a drummer. Don't remember if he needed a bass player, but so we wound up because he really had that. He had everything covered. I don't think he needed anyone, but
Yeah.
he wanted to play blues because he was certainly able to play all kinds of different stuff. So that was challenging, and it was great. It was really he kept it straight ahead for us, but he was playing really nice traditional blues. That's something that it seemed that he had a lot of fun doing that. So
Yeah. Wow.
because that's something that when you were at his stature, he can play basically whatever he wants to play. And taking it back and playing some kind of Otis Spann style piano, wow, such a great sound. Deep roots.
Another person that you worked with that we both admire and respected a great deal was Mel Brown. Tell me about
Oh,
what
yeah.
Mel meant to you.
Oh yeah, Mel is probably my biggest was the biggest influence for me after I had met him. I didn't meet him actually. I saw him many times before meeting him, and wow, it was just a phenomenal experience to see him live the first time. Then I would go and see him as many times as I could, and I guess there was a lot of respect there, but I could feel that all those years of experience and just the way he would approach music. Of course, his guitar playing was just mind-boggling for me, and it was, probably my biggest influence that I found in Toronto. Even though he wasn't from Toronto, you could feel that, you know, you could feel his roots and his experience in whatever he played. So yeah, I did my first show with him ever in 1998, and yes, it was a
What?
nervous experience, but it was great. It was great, and I learned a lot from him from day one. I remember him turning around. We were doing some kind of a shuffle, and of course, I, eagerly just saying, "Oh, I just want to play rhythm guitar." He wouldn't let me. He always point to me and say, "You play one," with his kind of gruff, voice. And he turned around to me when I was experimenting with chords and changing the blues rhythm, which should have been just like a Jimmy Reed rhythm, and he turned around and said, "Get back on that rhythm," he said to me with almost an angry voice. And I'll never forget that. That was great. That was a great, great lesson just to just do it. Just stay there and do it and hold on to something. Don't be noodling around or messing around on my show. So just that little detail, I have to give thanks to him where it's due because that really tightened up the ship for me. It really got me thinking about this, and it was like a lesson. It was a lesson, a live lesson. Great, and the way he would instruct, the band when we backed them up, we weren't that great, and we were sort of eager and energetic to kind of show our stuff or whatever, and so this is one example, and there's many examples, and it was great to have the pleasure to be able to play with him on many opportunities and to do recordings with him and just chatting with him as well. He was a really good guy. Whenever that possibility came up, about whatever, just things about life as well.
When you watch him as on stage or from the audience, as a guitar player, what do you learn from watching him play?
Well, just how connected he was to the music and the rhythm of the music, the groove, and how he'd fuse everything together, and how his natural ability to play with call and response was amazing as well. Just natural, not studied, natural, like studied in the sense that you didn't need to study that. It just that's the music, and this is how I play the music. And he had that ability. So you would notice that. He had his own sound as well. He had that big Super 400 guitar, which is like the biggest electric that you can possibly get. He had those huge hands, and he could really play that guitar aggressively or gently in a more jazzy or funk way, or he could play some Jimi Hendrix. Uh, so amazing ability to switch musically. So I would notice that live as well, and I would notice his ability to find his place in whatever situation he'd be playing. You know, a style and a sound that would fit whatever song would be playing. He played amazingly connected to the music itself.
Did you ever go away from the blues? Or is it still like is your pursuit of playing the blues still the same as it was 15, 20 years ago?
Oh no, no, that's changed quite a bit.
In what way?
I'm still playing blues, but I would call it roots and blues now. I did get interested in jazz some years ago, and more as a listener, and always with the root being in blues, because that's my favorite music is blues. But combining jazz with blues, so blues jazz or jazz blues, and I always liked a little bit of rock and roll sound as well, the old rock and roll from the origins of it all, 1950s and early 60s. So I started to get more interested in that as well. And recently, in the last, since the pandemic, I really got into acoustic fingerstyle blues.
Oh,
So that's something that's kind of new, and solo acoustic blues playing and fingerstyle. So that's something that's changed as well. That I didn't really play too much acoustic back in the day, and I liked it. I always loved it, but it was just like a huge new project to get into, and I realized that I'd really have to dedicate some large amount of time to get into and investigate that style. So there was different styles of music that changed my goals as for musical goals over the years. And so I wouldn't say it's the same anymore. I still enjoy playing with harmonica players, but I moved on and I started singing and forming my own band. And in my own band, I would play R&B, some rock and roll, always blues, traditional as I could with my ensemble, and some acoustic blues duos as well. And we mix in a little bit of country, a little bit of rock, and a little bit of, a little bit of R&B as well. So definitely things have changed over the
in the beginning, we were talking about how I probably haven't seen you in about 10, 11, 12 years.
years. Hmm.
Somewhere along the way, you moved to Peru. But before that, I guess you moved there because you started a business of guitar accessories. Is that the
That's right.
way? So tell me about how that started, the Pete Schmidt Guitar Accessories Company.
Well, actually, it goes back before that. In 2005, I started going to Cuba. And because at the time, I had, apart from playing music in the daytime, I would have an internet business of selling music, selling collectible vinyl, selling musical instruments, and accessories.
Sorry, in Cuba?
See, yeah, and
Okay.
Cuba and Havana. So for a period of around 4.5 years, I was going regularly to Havana and finding Cuban music for my customers in America. It was part of my reselling or my internet business. So I started to do that, and I started to get into Cuban music at the time. Obviously, I had to study it to know, you know, what kind of music to find, and because Cuban music, obviously at the time, the original Cuban music was and probably still is really hard to get. So that was my first foray into Latin America. Um, when that wrapped up, and it wrapped up because I had been doing that for about 10 years, selling on the internet from the mid 90s until the, oh, no, actually, the late 90s until about the late 2008, 2009 period, about 10 years. And so, as my internet business, it was time for a change, and I started thinking about what am I going to do next. And of course, I wanted to keep it around music so that I would be able to, continue to play the music, which is always, my first interest and first goal. So the idea to start manufacturing accessories in Latin America came to me one day, and I thought I'd investigate it. So that's how that started in 2009, 2010.
Okay, so two questions. One is when you're spending half the time in Cuba, musically, what were you doing? Like personally, what were you playing at that point?
Yeah, I was still playing blues. I would come back to Toronto for a month and I'd be in Cuba for a month. And I would alternate between the two countries. So when I came back, I would be playing blues as usual and as I had always been doing. In Cuba, there's not too much blues. I played a little bit, but it's Cuban music and it's a really a really profound country for music. There's so many different styles and so many great musicians and a lot of fusion there as well, but not really blues. So I was listening to Cuban music, especially the older stuff, the older styles. And I was around music all the time because it's everywhere in the city. So that was inspiring in a way. I did, I did start taking some lessons just for my interest and just because I like the music. But again, to be good at any form of music, you really have to kind of dedicate yourself to it to get into that style of music. So for me, it was sort of just a something to do while I was there to play, as a new hobby style of music.
So, when you decide that you want to look into guitar accessories, is there a reason behind that? Did you find that there was a need for things that were lacking?
Well, I was a real guitar collector and guitar nerd for for most of my life since I was a kid. And every time I would have buy a new guitar, which I had many at the time, I would buy accessories to go with it. And of course, guitar straps and cases and anything related to the guitar itself as accessories were something that I was always interested in and I would always include in my purchase. So the guitar straps and cases, etc., things like that. I understood that in Latin America, I could probably manufacture that type of product if I can find the right country and the right people to manufacture. Because in Latin America, they still handcraft, and you can find the raw materials. And of course, there's the difference in pricing as well. You can actually make a business out of it if you study it enough. So that's where that idea came up from my interest in guitars and accessories related to guitars. So I was quite into that back in the day.
So, just how you think, okay, I'm going to do guitar straps. I'm going to tell people how to make it. Are you designing these things? And
Yeah. Hmm.
and figuring out how you could make money off this and importing and exporting it to different countries and whatever. Like how much about that business did you know?
The actual manufacturing part, basically nothing. I knew a good guitar strap, and I had good guitar straps that I'd spent a lot of money on. Some of them, really quite expensive. And I knew the difference between something that was, made in Asia and low cost to something that was handcrafted in America. So I took some of the better examples that I had, and there was a trade show in Peru. And I went down with my business partner to investigate, and I brought samples. And we had sort of mock up designs of, straps and guitar cases and things like that we were planning to investigate to see if it's possible and show physical samples of some which I considered good straps and to see kind of cost it out and to meet some people that were actually making this type of a product. So it was a trade show that we went to, textile and leather trade show, and that's how that started. After the show, we spent a little bit of time down there just checking out the country, and then came back to Canada and continued on with the plan. And I returned shortly after, a couple months after, and actually started to look for people to make samples and to really cost it out properly to see what opportunities there were and what the material supply possibilities were and so on. The requirements, the government requirements for customs and so on, all those details had to be taken care of as well as living down here with the right immigration permission and so on.
Did you see it as an international business? Or I guess because of the internet, things could be international very easily. But how did you
Yeah.
picture that business to be when you initially started it?
Yeah, definitely thinking about making it international. And of course, the country with the biggest demand for that kind of product is America. Europe and Asia and the rest of North America, Mexico and Canada, much smaller. But America was really the target country, and it was going to be a small business. There was no plan to turn this into a huge multinational, but selling outside of outside of our area as well. That was a plan, and it had to do with how we were going to approach this. And, we started off with a crawl just to see how it went, and sort of testing the market was the first stage of that.
And is it easy to get into? I would please think that you would try to sell to places like the Guitar Center or whatever. But is it easy as a small independent guitar strap manufacturer to go into these stores and say, hey, this is what we have, which is a better quality, higher end strap for less money? Or like, is it easy to get into the door that way?
Definitely not easy at all. There's a ferocious competition and large established companies and lots of startups, lots and lots of startups. And you really have to have a good product. So in my case, for myself, I knew the difference of a strap that I really considered, or a case, or some idea around leather or fabric that I considered a good product for me, and that was the starting point in my case. And the design part of it as well is different. It is a different level of understanding, where you actually have to pay attention to the styles and maybe even the fashion of guitars, because it changes. Instruments in general, because we made products for all kinds of different instruments. So no, it wasn't easy to enter like a large guitar center or even just a small store. You have to approach it as a whole business, as a whole, instead of just here's my product, please buy it. No, it needs to be approached from a business side. There's a marketing side and a manufacturing side, of course, and there's the logistical side as well, and the financing side, and so on. You have to take care of all those bases at the same time, and understanding that your customer also has the same kind of framework with which they operate within. So to start up a new business takes a lot of input, of time and energy and creative thinking as well. Plus, pounding the pavement for sure, and going to trade shows and so on, which we did rapidly after developing our product. We started to go to trade shows like the NAM trade show in California and so on, and assume the cost and whatever, because that was a way of connecting with possible customers in that respect.
So, a number of years in, is this where you thought this business would be? Has it been 10 years now?
Yeah, yeah, it's changed a lot, and it definitely grew, and there was a lot of testing in the early periods, because I was making even dog collars and walking dog collars and leashes and camera straps, and I was getting into making leather wallets and all kinds of different products, but focusing in on the originally intended product became my focus in the last 4 or 5 years. And so it's changed definitely. And back in the day, there was no great dream or wish to, take over a segment of the industry or anything like that. But definitely, progress was made, and during the pandemic, the business grew big time because demand went really high during the COVID pandemic. So
How do you explain that? Is that just people wanting to be at home playing guitar?
I think so. I think so. And remembering that right now I manufacture for other brands, like I'm an OEM manufacturer now, an exporter. So I do some work under my own name still, but the largest part of my business is OEM. So I just manufacture for other companies and other brands. So it has another brand, but it's made by me down here. So those other brands, being American, when the pandemic started, nobody knew what was going to happen, but demand really, really went high. Probably because of the U.S. Um, I guess the U.S. government passing on their relief payments to the population, and people staying at home for sure and getting tired of watching Netflix and looking at their guitar in the corner there and thinking, well, maybe I should pick it up and see. And a new audience for these products as well, younger people. Acoustic guitars and so on became popular, really popular. Ukuleles and as well, ukuleles and stringed instruments in general picked up steam, and demand became higher, and supply was really limited because of the pandemic, meaning that demand remained and remains high for all these reasons. That's why. And I do think, yes, as a hobby, especially guitars have really increased over 2 years ago, really quite a bit. The large manufacturers just can't keep up with production demands.
Do you have a physical store in Peru?
No, I don't. I do some. There's an internet site where products are in it, but it's an American-based site that sells products under my own name. I do sell in Peru and in Latin America, but I sell a wholesale to stores, and I stayed away from selling retail, and I leave that up to a couple guys that run my website in America. They actually sell directly to the public. But down here, no, I don't have a store because I'm really a wholesale manufacturer and exporter.
What was it like moving down there when you decide, okay, I'm going to pursue this? Other than the business part of it, but going and saying, this is where I'm going to live for the next little while. What was that like?
Well, I had the Cuba experience, so I was already speaking Spanish, and I was used to the Latin American culture and the food and the city life of Latin America. And Lima's a really big city, like probably 11 million now. So getting used to that size of a city took some getting used to for sure. But I was already quite used to, the lifestyle of Latin America, and yeah. So it wasn't a shock or anything. It was a learning process, but it went relatively quickly in my case, and it really wasn't too, it wasn't really too much of a great challenge. I actually quite enjoyed it, and I liked the climate and the people, and the fast pace of life takes some getting used to, and that took a while. The food is great, and there's a little bit of a different way of thinking than we would be used to in North America. So all of which can be looked at in a positive way.
For sure. Would you ever come back to Canada, or do you think that's no longer a possibility?
Well, at this point, I'm coming back to visit as often as I can, especially now when things are much freer for traveling. So definitely going to be coming up for visiting. But to live again, I'm not really sure. I don't, I don't have any plans right now. I'm quite okay in Latin America. We'll see. We never know where things will go in the future, so can't say anything absolutely definite about that. But for now, I'm taking it one year at a time and continuing on here in Latin America.
And musically, what are you doing now?
Yeah, I definitely keep busy with shows here. As soon as I came down, I started to investigate. Within my first day or two, I was already playing. I had my guitar in tow and just sitting in with some of the bands here. There's not a big blues scene, but there's a rock and roll scene and jazz, and there are a few people that play blues. So of course, I wound up playing with them quickly and mixing in with some of the other styles of music, some jazz and some other rock bands as well, classic rock band. But after about a year or so, I started focusing in on playing the music that I wanted to play, and that meant forming my own band, my own trio. And I did that, and
And what was that like?
yeah, that was kind of
Because I never even knew you sang.
yeah. Well, I wouldn't consider myself a great singer, but I really wanted to do the music that I wanted to do, and just as a trio, so just with bass and drums, and singing songs that I wanted to do. And of course, I always like to do instrumentals as well, especially around the jazz side of things. And audiences here are interesting in a way, in this way, that it's kind of foreign music for them because it's just not played. It wasn't played on the radio, it wasn't accessible on TV. Now with YouTube and so on, it's available, but there's no history, no long history of blues or roots music from North America. So it became like I would put on a show and then I would talk about the history of blues and I would explain this song and I would explain a little bit the origins of the music and link it together with the rock and roll and the jazz and sort of a little presentation of what they call it in Spanish a didactico, which is like a little mini seminar presentation, play and talk and play and talk. People seem to like that, and I started doing that with my own trio, and I would have regular house gigs in small places, larger outdoor concerts and festivals as well. So regular nightclub type shows as well. So we actually kept fairly busy up till the dreaded pandemic hit, and then everything was down and out for a year and a half. But up to that point, really keeping it steady. I was playing with some musicians that are relatively traditional in their blues taste, which is always a pleasure. And when I was coming back to Canada, I would, join my friends and we would play like we did in the old days. So that's what was happening there. It was never there was never a period where there was no opportunity to play here because I could make my own gigs with singing in my own way or presenting my own show, which was good. That was a really different step that I hadn't taken before in Toronto. I had the ability to make my own show.
And also doing now acoustic shows?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of acoustic shows now and getting back into the plan of traveling again to other countries in Latin America because I have played at in quite a few different countries in South America as a guest. So I would join other bands. I'd play other bands and I would sing and present a show and play with a backup band in Argentina and Paraguay and Chile. I go quite a bit and actually done some recordings with a band down there and Colombia and of course all kinds of places here in Peru and including other styles of music too, including a little bit of country and a little bit of rock and roll, old rock and roll. So it's quite and now acoustic, quite a bit of acoustic blues in the duo format, especially now, post pandemic. There's a lot of places that just are restarting now and they are not ready for bands and they're just getting accustomed to smaller formats and acoustic events.
Will you do any recording of your own? I know
Yeah,
recordings are kind of weird these days, but
yeah, it's a bit weird. I did another jam track project for a harmonica player during the pandemic.
what series are you, what volume are you up to now?
Well, that would be the fifth disc, and
Okay.
this was just me playing solo guitar acoustically, and I did this with the harmonica player Ronnie Shellis, who has a lot of harmonica students. So he just said, "Can you make a disc of this music that with no band, so that there can be a real focus on just playing as a duo." for people to practice harmonica in the duo format acoustic. So that was an interesting project. That was a little recording. And recording with other bands and other projects, including here and in, like I said, in Chile. And I do need to record some of my own music as well. I have a big backlog of songs that I really need to get to. Just really for my own interest. At this point, thinking about it as a business idea, the Jam Tracks projects were always kind of in that direction
Right.
as an actual product that we were going to.
Can people still buy those?
Oh yeah, online they're still available. I think in iTunes and. But it's all just quite strange now. All of this selling of music and
Yeah.
downloads and so on. I think it's probably available everywhere. So I even will put some tracks out there as well, and just sort of send a link for somebody that's with the exception of the project that was just done a year and a half ago. That's still for sale. But the other discs are probably out there somewhere, but for sale. But it's many years have passed. It's like over 20 years now when the first Jam
Well,
Track.
I have my copy of the Ultimate
Oh,
Blues
there it
Jam
is.
Volume 1.
That's right. That's the collector's edition.
Exactly. I
It's
should have
a
had you sign
vintage
it.
piece. It's a vintage piece. Yes, with Shane Scott.
Wow.
Yep. So,
Pete, thanks
yeah.
so much for doing this. It's been so long since I saw you. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, it's been excellent to connect again. And
Yeah, it just looks like you've been very busy.
oh yeah, always a reason to keep energetic and continuing along.
And so if anybody's interested in your guitar accessories, it's peteschmidt.com.
Yes, peteschmidt.com. And these days I'm doing also, I do record videos for guitar related lessons and tutorials, which I put on YouTube. And I do a lot of virtual classes and seminars as well.
How do people contact you for that?
They can contact me through my email at peteschmidtblues@gmail.com, and on Facebook, my Pete Schmidt Blues page on Facebook and Instagram, all those social media things, including on YouTube.
Well, thank you, Pete.
Yeah.
Really nice catching up.
Great to catch up with you as well, Mako, and let's try to get in contact next time I'm in Toronto. I'll
Yeah.
send you a message.
Definitely. Great. Thanks.
Thanks so much.